Welcome to the fourth session of the KLEPTOTRACE training series. My name is Edgars Zadiņš, and I'm joined by my co-moderator Laura Tvardovska. We are both from Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia. We, of course, are honored to host today's seminar on the early detection of high-level corruption schemes within AML and CFT due diligence. I think we have a fantastic lineup of experts who will be sharing insights, case studies, and best practices to enhance financial transparency and asset recovery. We encourage you all participants to engage, ask questions via chat function, and make most of this opportunity to learn from leading professionals in the field.
Yes, and before we begin, we'll just go over a few housekeeping points. First, please note that the meeting will be recorded, and by participating, you thereby give your consent to being recorded. The recording will later on be available online via YouTube if you want to refresh your memory about any of the points made. The chat will also be open throughout the session for your questions and comments. However, please bear in mind that we have limited time, therefore your comments might not be therefore, people might not be able to answer your questions. And last but not least, we are planning to have a coffee break from around 2:20 p.m. to 3 p.m. And when you can stretch your legs, grab a coffee, and so forth. And we would like to extend our gratitude to the KLEPTOTRACE project coordinators at Transcrime, to our partners here at FIU Latvia, and of course also to all of our participants. And without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to our opening speakers, Deputy Head of FIU Latvia, Mr. Carlos Matusons, and also after him, a few introductory words will be given by Giovanni Nicolazzo from Transcrime, our partner organization. Please.
Thank you very much, Laura and Edgars, for this introduction. Esteemed colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all today to today's fourth KLEPTOTRACE training session hosted by the Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia. This marks another significant milestone in the KLEPTOTRACE project, an initiative which is co-funded by the European Union to strengthen our collective fight against high-level corruption, kleptocracy, and sanctions evasion across the EU. As you are well aware, financial crime operates across borders, exploiting legal loopholes and undermining trust in financial institutions. And this is particularly why cross-border cooperation, intelligence sharing, and capacity building are essential in detecting and preventing illicit financial flows. Thus, KLEPTOTRACE serves as a crucial platform for us to enhance our expertise, align best practices, and improve early detection mechanisms against transnational corruption. As you may recall, throughout our previous training sessions, we have explored AML-CFT strategies, typologies of illicit financial flows, and methods for tracing suspicious transactions. Today, we build on that foundation with a targeted discussion on identifying early indicators of transnational corruption within EU banks' AML-CFT frameworks. Our agenda for today will cover a number of topics, including key corruption risk indicators, best practices in AML compliance, the role of public-private partnerships in strengthening due diligence, and my personal favorite, real-world case studies. These discussions are critical as we work together to enhance financial system integrity and disrupt criminal networks. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our law enforcement partners, AML professionals, researchers, and investigative journalists who have joined us today and agreed to share their expertise. Colleagues, your dedication truly is instrumental in safeguarding the financial system from abuse. On behalf of FIU Latvia, I thank each and every one of you for your participation today, and I wish you a productive and enriching training session filled with insightful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. Giovanni, word to you now.
Hi, everybody. And thank you for participating to this training session that has been organized by the Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia within the KLEPTOTRACE framework. My name is Giovanni Nicolazzo, and I'm the research coordinator in Transcrime for the KLEPTOTRACE project. I will just take a few minutes at the very beginning of this training to introduce you a little bit about KLEPTOTRACE and also the recent output of KLEPTOTRACE that can be of your interest. So KLEPTOTRACE is a project funded by the European Commission Internal Security Fund, and it is aimed at strengthening the European Union capacity for asset recovery, sanction tracing in the fight against high-level corruption and kleptocracy. The project is structured around the 5 main areas, such as research, training, like the one that we are having today. It also aims at providing policy recommendation, but also the development of a toolbox which offers technical solutions that may enhance the capability to detect high-level corruption scheme. So today's training session is organized by Financial Intelligence Unit, and it is an important component of the activities of the KLEPTOTRACE project pillar. It is specifically designed to focus on the early detection of high-level corruption, with a particular focus in respect with the anti-money laundering due diligence duty, where financial institutions must carefully monitor and address risk. Indeed, corruption is widely recognized as an enabler of financial fraud, money laundering, and other economic offenses, which in turn undermine the integrity of our financial system. But each type of corruption has its own distinct characteristics, with high-level corruption and kleptocracy standing apart due, for instance, the significant role of corporate vehicles, the complex transnational jurisdiction that are involved in those schemes. In that regard, an important milestone of the KLEPTOTRACE project that may be of interest for you is the report titled New Form and Risk Factor for High-Level Transnational Corruption Scheme that was published in the context of the KLEPTOTRACE project, and you can find on the KLEPTOTRACE website or the LinkedIn page, and in a moment also in the chat. And the report basically consists in an in-depth analysis of more than 40 cases of high-level corruption, recent cases, and offered an understanding on how this scheme were structured. It identified several common partners and also risk factor for an early detection of this scheme. Indeed, the report has also an annex available on request, which provides a detailed description of each risk indicator that may support your due diligence activities. So I encourage all the participants at this training to review these resources and consider how they can be applied to their specific professional context, and also to share with colleagues if they think that they may be useful. So this was just a very overview and main reference of the effort of the KLEPTOTRACE project, which can be relevant for your daily activities. Now I return the floor back to Latvia for the moderation of this training. And I remind you again that the registration of the training will be then published on the KLEPTOTRACE website and KLEPTOTRACE social media. So you can follow all the development and update on our website or the LinkedIn page. Thank you again for being part of this training today, and have a good training session.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you for the valuable work that you've been doing. Okay, I think we can move on to our first speaker, Krista Asmusa, who is here representing Transparency International Latvia, Latvia's leading anti-corruption NGO. Krista, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. If not, then please let me know. But I'll start with sharing my screen. So just a moment. So I hope everything is visible. So yes, I will open the event with my presentation about third-party role in uncovering corruption. But before that, I would really like to thank the organizers for inviting our organization to this event, because I think non-governmental sector might sometimes be overlooked in this conversation, because when we talk about corruption cases and working with them and investigating, it's usually only investigative authorities, government officials that we think about. But with my presentation, I would like to highlight the impact that a third party, which means non-governmental sector or citizens, can play in this whole scheme of uncovering corruption cases. So firstly, about our organization, just quickly an overview. If hopefully you have heard about Transparency International, so Latvian chapter is DALNA. Just to understand why we are talking about this, like Laura introduced me, that I'm representing leading NGO on these money laundering and anti-corruption topics. So we have been working in this sector since 1998. We are a member organization, so it's not like we are funded by some specific fund or person. But yeah, we have 93 members at this point that are overlooking our office work, and our work mainly consists of various projects on different topics. And today I will cover some of them that could be relevant to our today's topic. So to explain the content of my presentation, so I will focus on three topics. Firstly, I will talk briefly about Corruption Perceptions Index. That's just a topical thing right now because in the beginning of this month we announced the last year's results. So I'll talk briefly about that. Then about our as NGOs projects that we have been conducted in the past couple of years on the topic of anti-corruption, anti-money laundering, and that could highlight how can a non-governmental sector be beneficial and be an actual partner in this whole process. And then lastly, I would like to touch upon another topic with another part of this whole conversation, the citizens and how can they participate in the uncovering corruption process, which means that by reporting, and this topic will cover also the whistleblower issue. So to start with the Corruption Perceptions Index, like I said, just briefly, I will give an overview of what it is, because this has been announced for many years now, but maybe sometimes people don't really understand where is it coming from and how is it actually made. So to explain a little bit about that, that is an initiative by Transparency International, the global organization, where annually this research is done based on many other researches that other independent authorities and organizations conduct on various topics, like existence of some laws in the countries and protection of whistleblowers and administrative burden in some countries and government ability to prosecute corrupt officials and various topics like this. So this research compiles the results of these individual research and therefore draws up this index, which varies from 0 to 100. Basically, if a country gets 100, that means there is no corruption there, at least no perceived corruption. But if it's closer to 0, then we understand that there's a lot of problem there. So that's just the background information about the index itself. But about Latvia, well, this year, we recently, like I mentioned, announced last year's results, and we have a score of 59, which is not ideal. It is below European average score, and it is below both of other Baltic states scores, which is, players that we usually like to compare ourselves with. I would encourage not to look at the rank because the rank is subjective. It's not really saying much, but the score itself, it's unfortunately taken a step back, because last year we had 1 point higher score. Now we are back to 59, the same level that we were in 2021 and 2022. But the question is, what can we learn from this? This is a number, 59, but what does it really mean? So we have analyzed the information which this Corruption Perceptions Index is based on, and we have drawn conclusions about why is it not rising as much as we would like to see. And the main areas that are lacking are open data strategy and weak, weak or actually non-existent lobbying legislation, even though, you know, there is legislation there, but it doesn't work in practice at the moment. Also, the monitoring of the public funds is lacking. And yeah, the different other issues, which one that we highlighted this year that I think we haven't discussed before is also the state audits office, not the work itself, but how we implement the recommendations of our state audit office, because they're doing a lot of audits all the time, and the fact is that we're not really implementing that many of these recommendations as we should. So that's also something that has been identified in this research, which supports the score for Latvia at the moment. So this is one thing that Transparency International, the global organization, has been doing, like I said, for many years now, and for foreseeable future is going to be continuing. But next, I would like to touch upon the projects that we, the Latvian chapter, have been working on in past couple of years that could be relevant for this discussion. I realized by making presentation that I hope I will make it in time, because there are a lot of things that I wanted to cover to highlight the important things for this topic of third-party role. So regarding our projects, one that I wanted to mention, but just briefly mention, was the project or research that we did in 2021 about money laundering risks in Latvia and the Baltics. Why I'm saying that I want to just touch upon that is that at this moment the conclusions are not that relevant anymore, because a lot has changed since this time. For example, the conclusions of this research were that the bigger risks were like use of shell companies in money laundering schemes, or weak oversight of trust and company service providers, cross-border transactional issues, and also new financial technologies as a risk for money laundering. So a lot of these issues have been addressed in recent years, but about these new financial technologies, that's actually a topic that we later addressed in another research in 2022, specifically focusing on virtual asset topic. Unfortunately, that project did not reach the goal that we were hoping that it will, because the goal that we were aiming for was to prepare recommendations for lawmakers to properly regulate the virtual asset topic. But currently we do have a regulation on the virtual assets, but it's basically the same as this MiCA regulation in European Union. So we still are lacking in this area. I think there are still loopholes in that regulation, so that's probably something to work on in the future. But another research that I wanted to highlight is something that we are doing at the moment. This is a project on strengthening law enforcement agency capabilities on anti-money laundering work. And this project is separated in like two parts. One part is focusing on data availability, and the second part is more about inter-institutional cooperation. So the second part we are starting right now. So about that, I'm not going to have many conclusions at the moment, but about the first part, we have finished our part of the research, because this project is conducted at the same time in 9 different European countries. So it will be interesting at the end to see the comparison, how we look among other countries, because myself, I went into this project thinking that we have actually everything with data availability is very good in Latvia, and maybe we're not going to have anything to improve at the end of this project. But as the project goes on, of course, we're learning that there are things that we can also work on, and learning from other countries and learning from our own needs and experience. So The conclusions at the moment about data availability is that the issue in Latvia, even though we do have a lot of publicly available data that authorities can use, it is still like very fragmented. It's very spread across different regulations, different registers. There's also limited cross-border availability among European Union countries, which means sometimes there's like a paywall for some registers, sometimes some things are not registered in some countries that are registered in other countries. So this is also an issue. Of course, the public availability, because again, in Latvia, I think we have a lot of information publicly available, but still seeing the whole situation in these other countries, we understand that that is also something that we could improve in our country. And like I mentioned, yeah, the issue of what needs to be registered. Even though we do have a lot of registers in Latvia and a lot of data is available, especially for investigative authorities, but there are still some aspects, some loopholes that these people who want to launder money know about, and they use the fact that some information does not have to be registered in Latvia, and then this can be, of course, misused. So the purpose of this project is basically to understand and to answer the question at the end, is the currently available information in Latvia's registers enough to efficiently investigate financial crimes. So hopefully at the end of this project we will be able to answer this question, and hopefully the answer will be positive, but if not, then still our objective will be to compile these conclusions and prepare some recommendations how to address these issues, and then talk to lawmakers, decision makers, and see how we can improve the system. So the third part of my presentation, like I mentioned in the beginning, is about the reporting. Here I want to talk about the whistleblowing regulation as such. Some data that we have, we can present. It's very fresh and shows, yeah, how society understands this topic. And another, yeah, again, our research that we have done on this topic and our conclusions on what the main issues are and how can we improve the system. Because the reason why we want to talk about whistleblowing, actually, I think we always want to talk about whistleblowing when we talk about possibilities to uncover corruption, is that oftentimes we expect that governmental authorities, investigative authorities will just know everything, have all the information, but when it comes to actually providing this information, reporting, then people are not that keen on doing that. So we cannot overlook the fact that usually this person, this potential whistleblower, potential reporting person, is the one that does see the wrongdoings in person and has this information and could provide this information to the authorities. So that's why I want to emphasize the really high importance of proper whistleblower protection, because that can be essential for facilitating this process of uncovering corruption. So firstly, about the general data, I checked that KNAB has very recently published. I think they publish this information every year, and now there's fresh information about the survey that they did in 2024, and this shows actually the tendencies are not changing much over the years. I just pulled out the information about the reporting, and yeah, in this survey there was a question about if a person would be willing to report, and we see that only would be willing to offer a bribe. So this is, I hope, a good tendency, that in the previous survey the percentage was 20 and now it's 17, but whether this 3% decrease is significant, that's hard to tell. But still, I think it's still very high number of people that are saying that they would be willing to offer a bribe. And yeah, the same goes for reporting, which yeah, there was a question in the survey whether the person would be willing to report, and 12% of people say that they're definitely not ready to report corruption. it was around 40% of people that said that they would, but only if there was a possibility to report anonymously. Because if we remember the whistleblowing regulation in Latvia, it kind of doesn't allow for anonymous whistleblowing. I think it would more correct it would be to say that anonymous reporting could not be considered whistleblowing. Of course, you can report anonymously. That's not an issue. But in order to receive protections as a whistleblower, a report cannot be anonymous. So this is something that we see that society would like to have, these protections, even though they're not disclosing their identity. But regarding this KNOB survey, I wanted to highlight this 12%, which is still, I think, very high number, considering that these people are under no circumstances ready to report corruption. And we ourselves conducted a survey also last year that was specifically within a project of whistleblowing law review. We're currently in the process of doing that. We will have a report later this year on our current legislation's evaluation. And during this process, we also conducted a survey specifically focused on whistleblowing. And among other questions, there was also a question of which wrongdoings do people consider societal interest. And we saw that, I will say, only 60%. It maybe sounds high percentage, but considering what the question was, that only 60% of people recognize that money laundering is a matter of societal interest. Well, that can be explained, I think, with that people usually don't associate these kinds of things with themselves, because among other answers, there was also a question, do they consider like wrongdoings in a workplace, some work safety issues, a matter of societal interest, and there the percentage was higher, which means that, you know, people always consider these things more important that affects them directly, but somehow, yeah, 40% of people do not recognize that money laundering is something that affects society as a whole. And yeah, and 43% would report a wrongdoing, including financial crime, which kind of goes together with this KNOB survey, that also around 40%, more than 40% would be willing to report, but like I said, this around 40% would report only anonymously. So here, at least, yeah, 43% in our survey answered that they would report. I'm realizing that usually when I talk about these surveys, it's always negative. I think it's always somehow highlights negative tendencies. So hopefully we can turn that around soon. But regarding whistleblowing in general, I just wanted to quickly touch upon that. I'm not going to go into details and explain what is whistleblowing. I really hope that you are all familiar, at least familiar with the concept and what does it mean and how to do that. But here I just wanted to emphasize something that's, I see that in legislative process and when drafting this law, it was not really considered, is that this is actually expression of freedom of speech. It's not something that has come up from European directive out of nowhere. Now there is obligation to protect whistleblowers, because the problem is that there's also this stigma in our society regarding whistleblowers, and there is this idea that that's something bad and it's something that shouldn't be done. But overall, we need to start recognizing the importance and the value in whistleblowing, and realize that this is really an integral part of uncovering financial crimes early. So yeah, here I had a couple of slides about the freedom of speech aspect. I'm maybe not going to go into much details here, just wanted to emphasize the fact that this is something that we should consider, that it's not something new. Whistleblowing is not a new concept. That's not something that was just made up because of some reasons that European Union came up, but this is something that is human right for every person. So this should be definitely respected and protected and encouraged. And regarding that, so the state has of course, the obligation is to draw up the legal framework, which, of course, we have done. And in my opinion, in Latvia, we do have a very strong legislative framework for whistleblowers and strong protections in place. However, as I think I'm saying it a lot in this presentation, there is still a room for improvement. Yeah, maybe this too, I'm not going to go into much details about the obligations that the states have, but I will turn to Transparency International. Again, the global organizations work on the topic, and then I'll introduce you to some of our research and our conclusions on this topic. So hopefully I will make it all in time. So firstly, I wanted to mention this research that Transparency International, the head organization, has conducted in, I think it was in 2023, reviewing European Union countries and how well do they protect whistleblowers, how well do they have they transposed this European Union directives requirements. Here it looks like Latvia is in a good place. So regarding the scope, we have a very wide scope of our regulation. Basically, the only criteria is that this issue that a person can report about and they will be considered and protected as a whistleblower has to be of societal interest. And what is a societal interest? Basically, also like State Chancellor is explaining in their guidelines, is that whatever is not personal interest. So the scope of our regulation is pretty wide. That's why this is really a good aspect also comparing ourselves to other European Union countries. But it does not look so good in other slides. So another topic that Transparency International looked into was the possibility of anonymous reporting, because European Union directive does not exclude this possibility. But we have drafted our law in a way that anonymous reporting is not whistleblowing. That is due to the fact that if you're reporting anonymously, then there is really not a possibility to apply any protections to you, because the institution that you reported to is not going to know, who you are. So that's like practically not possible. However, of course, there are ways around it. One example that comes to mind is Corruption Prevention Bureau's reporting platform, where you can report anonymously. You do have a way to get back to this report, but the Bureau is not going to know your identity, but there's still possibility to communicate and to learn more about this report if it's necessary. So there are ways around it. There are ways to ensure that anonymous reporting could still be considered whistleblowing. So this is something that we are also currently with our organization discussing within the our whistleblowing laws review at the moment. But this is again something that we see that in other European Union countries this has been considered, but for us it's at the moment not possible within the law. And another thing that was interesting I wanted to highlight from this research was the penalties regarding whistleblowing protection. In our regulation, we do have penalties for example, creating negative consequences for the whistleblower, which is of course prohibited, and also for interrupting the process. But there is not, well, there is technically a possibility to complain if your identity has been disclosed, because this has been the biggest issue, and this is also something that people are the most worried about, their identity protection, if they do decide to blow the whistle. But unfortunately, currently in Latvia, this mechanism we have in place to, well, not really to protect, but to complain in cases of identity disclosure is very complicated. It is not specifically described in the whistleblowing law, but then you have to go through police and through our criminal law and complain about disclosure of information that should not be disclosed. So this kind of process has not been used yet, although we are aware of many cases where people have come to conclusion that their identity has been disclosed. So currently this system in Latvia is a little bit lacking. And another thing that unfortunately is not in place in Latvia is any consequences for not implementing this protection mechanism for whistleblowers. So all the job places above 50, which have above 50 employees, well, with some exceptions, but they have to have whistleblowing systems in place. But unfortunately, there is no enforcement mechanism, there is no consequences in case there is no system in place. So that's also something that we're currently working on to improve this issue. But regarding Transparency International Latvia's work, we have worked on this topic of whistleblowing actually a lot in recent years. So in 2022, we conducted this research of internal whistleblowing systems in companies because currently the responsible organization, the responsible institution of whistleblowing topic is State Chancellery, but they're covering the public sector. They're compiling information, publishing statistics every year about the whistleblowing tendencies in Latvia, but that covers only public sector. So the private sector is not really covered. So yeah, in 2022, we did research specifically targeting the companies, the private sector. Then later in 2023, well, I will say updated because we had prepared this document previously, but now we have updated to match the current regulation in 2023, this handbook for whistleblowers, just briefly explaining the process and how to do it and what to consider. And then the most recent research on the topic was in 2024 on whistleblowing systems in regions, both in public and private sector. We interviewed and analyzed various municipalities and also some of the private sector companies that answered to our invitation to participate in this research. So from this all research, we have drawn some conclusions, but I'll turn to that a little bit later. And I mentioned that currently we are working on the whistleblowing regulations review. And within this project, we have conducted a survey last year. And I just wanted to highlight some of the answers in this survey that I think, again, show not the best tendencies, unfortunately. So first, I wanted to present this question that we had. I think it was the first question in the survey. Very generally, do you know what is whistleblowing? And here, again, maybe the percentage seems high, 55%, but I will still say that only 55% answered that yes, they do understand what is whistleblowing, and 36%, which is more than 1/3 of whole in the people that participated in this survey, do not at least answer that they do not understand, do not know what is whistleblowing. And that is also something that we see in our work, in our organization. We do have a whistleblowing center where we do receive reports. And we also see that the main issue at the moment is that people don't really understand what it is, when to do it, how to do it. So this means that also there is still need for educational work. Another question that I wanted to present here is a question: would you be willing to report if you witness wrongdoing? Here is the results that I presented before, that 43% admitted that yes, they would be willing to report. But what's more interesting is that the other answers were no, and then there was a reason why. And the most popular no answer was that no, because people don't believe that anything is going to change. And the second most popular option was that they're afraid of the consequences, which kind of also goes together with the next question about trust in the whistleblowing system. Actually, the majority of people say that they do not trust the system. They do not trust that their identity is going to be protected and that they're not going to suffer any negative consequences. And here, well, basically the same question, but asked a little bit differently. Do people agree that whistleblowers will face negative consequences in the workplace? And the vast majority responded that yes, they do believe that consequences are inevitable in this case. So this data and the research that we have conducted in recent years altogether indicate a problem that we do have in the whistleblowing sector at the moment. And here I just pointed out some of the main things that we have identified. For example, that whistleblowing cases, firstly, there's not much cases that are publicly talked about, and those that are usually highlight the negative experiences, the situations where people did suffer consequences, or that really nothing changed at the end. So yeah, unfortunately, there is a lot of negative connotation with whistleblowing. Then, of course, the thing that I mentioned from the survey results is the lack of trust in the system, and also that I think it's maybe, well, not probably it's specific also to other countries, but in Latvia, we really feel that this is issue in a lot of cases, that workplace teams are small, or in regions, municipalities are small, so everybody knows everybody. And in these circumstances, it's much, much less likely that people are going to report, because we have had comments such as, how am I going to report them? Our children go to the same school. How can I, talk to that person after reporting about them? So that is an issue in society, and this actually, I do not have an answer how to address this topic, but, one step at a time. There are some things that we have recommendations on how to improve. So yeah, lack of strong leadership is something else that we have identified that is an issue, because this understanding of whistleblowing and the value of it really has to come from leadership in every workplace, so that this is not just a separate document, this internal system. This is not just a separate mechanism that has to be in place because, to check the box, because it has to be there according to the law, but there has to be this work culture. It has to, grow into the work culture, this understanding that this is something good and something that should be encouraged. And that, of course, can come from strong leadership. And a lack of common understanding in whistleblower protection. This is something, again, that can be addressed, and I think it's a matter of time also, because whistleblowing regulation, even though this is the 6th year it's in place in Latvia, but still I think it's fairly fresh regulation, and there was some updates in 2022. So there's still governmental authorities are still learning. There's still lack of unified understanding, because sometimes these things and the understanding and the interpretation differs from institution to institution. So this is also something that has to be worked on, and therefore these recommendations that we have come to from our organization's work in improving whistleblower protection is the necessity for training at multiple levels, management, department leaders and employees. Also, like I mentioned before, it has to be a part of overall work culture. It cannot be this whistleblowing topic, and system cannot really be this just a document that has to be drafted and that is drafted and it's put in the shelf and it's collecting dust. It really has to be integrated in the workplace culture. Another thing that should be done is sharing examples of good practice, which that is, I think, a role for the whole society to talk about these things and experiences in the whistleblowing, and also try to highlight the positive aspects and the things that were accomplished through this. my previously mentioned issue on anonymous reporting, which is also something that can be addressed and that we should be working on addressing, and the monitoring of implementation of whistleblowing systems. Again, yeah, these last couple of points is something that we are currently working on in our project, but still there is a lot of work to be done on the topic. But like I said, one step at a time, that's not impossible. So that concludes my presentation. Again, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for inviting our organization. I think it's yeah, always interesting to hear different points of view, because yeah, non-governmental sector is not your typical player in anti-corruption work. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Kristef. That was a very insightful presentation. Let's just, I don't know, maybe give a bit more time for our panelists to post their questions in the chat if any questions arise. I was personally thinking back to the previous slide that you presented regarding penalties, meaning penalties for violating whistleblower protection and penalties for knowingly reporting false information. To what extent should legal repercussions possibly hold back potential whistleblowers from coming forward in the context of them potentially being held criminally liable for reporting false information?
Well, I think that should not be something that even is a consideration, because I think the false reporting is, it can be an issue if it's really intentional. If a person has a suspicion of wrongdoing, they should be coming forward, because also the regulation is built in a way that in order to be a whistleblower, you have to have suspicion of the wrongdoing. It does not say that you need to have like a definite proof and 100% true and reliable information that there has been a wrongdoing. In this sense, the law is kind of in favor of whistleblowers, which means that if you have a suspicion, if you have in good faith, like the key thing is good faith. So if really in good faith you believe that there is a wrongdoing, you should be reporting that, and there should not be. And also, I have not heard that there has been a case of repercussions in actual reporting in good faith. It's more to protect this mechanism to protect it from misuse, which also, of course, is a risk. But again, it's not many cases that we've heard that there is intentional misleading information or wrong information. There has been cases, yes, but again, there has been very solid proof in the beginning that this was false information, and then there was, yeah, the relevant consequences in the end. But my point is that this definitely should not be a factor for whistleblowers that do want to report but are afraid that they don't have enough information. Still, that's definitely not going to be considered a wrongful reporting.
I think we can now move on to our third speaker, Melissa Tavecchio and Laura Bonara from Global Insurance and Asset Management Providers Generali Group. Please.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, let me just share the presentation. Okay. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Put in presentation mode. Okay. So
Perfect.
here we go. So thank you. And I'm Lara Bonora. So I'm working in Generali Group. As you know, that our group is mainly focused on insurance, but includes also banks, asset management, and also other financial institutions. My background, actually, I'm working in the anti-financial crime department, and I'm in charge of the anti-bribery corruption program. I'm glad today to be here with Melissa Tavecchio, my colleague, and we are glad now to introduce our session that is focused on the anti-corruption objective in anti-money laundering activity, and we would like to give a perspective of a financial insurance intermediary. So let me try to move. Okay. So today we are going to cover an aspect that all tend to consider separate to another. And I'm referring to the intersection between money laundering and corruption. As you know, corruption is an offense against organization, while money laundering is a crime that is related to the misuse of the financial system. These two items cannot be considered as separate silos because to some extent they are both part of the same dark side. Consider that corruption can see as both a cause and a consequence of financial crimes. In fact, corrupt practices such as the one that we know, the bribery and the embezzlement, can generate illicit funds that need to be laundered. And on the other side, the availability of laundered money can fuel further corruption, and it provides some means that facilitate the bribe to official. And this is we are creating a vicious cycle that can erode the public trust, but also treat the economical growth. But let's go to some logical elements that I would like to show on how all these three boxes that are represented in this slide, so I mean this item of money laundering, corruption and sanction, are interconnected. And this is the reason why we in Generali have a look also to our governance chart, orga chart, just to have a governance view on this. We have organized our group anti-financial crime, creating both vertical and horizontal unit. Horizontal such as process operation and risk assessment and control. This is why, because we are not look to such risk as a separate pillars, but we would like to look also the interconnection of these three subjects, because doing so, we are able to better assess the risk, also leveraging on common methodologies for the risk assessment and the control, on common processes for the detection, and also some tool for the detection as well. This structure is also, since we are a group-wide company, this structure is also reflected in the other legal entity. And this is important because create a facilitation of communication from group to local entity, and it creates an harmonized approach also within the group. Now I would like to introduce a case that I'm going to explore with you, and it's a relevant one. So it's called like a Magnitsky case. To me, this is a relevant case because clearly show some interconnection, some links between these risks, so between money laundering, corruption, and also the part of sanction. I don't pretend to be exhaustive in this case because I know that was widely debated in the past, but I try to enlighten the key points that I think are the most important aspect for the audience today. So Magnitsky, Sergei Magnitsky, was a Russian tax advisor who, in 2008, discovered and reported a massive tax fraud scheme that was related to the embezzlement of around $230 million from the Russian treasury. What's happened? This guy that reported such fraud at the end was arrested, imprisoned by the same official to whom he reported the case, and died later on after 1 year in custody under unsuspicious circumstances. The money that are coming from this embezzlement were transferred to Switzerland, and they are subject to some investigation and seizures. Part of this money was also laundered from a Russian company and its subsidiary, which were at the end persecuted in New York. This case so lead to international sanction against Russian official, but we'll have in the meanwhile also an investigation in Switzerland where part of this account were frozen, only a small part were confiscated, and the fact that was debated was that the rest of the fund were returned to the account holders who were reported by Magnitsky. So this investigation at the end was criticized for the lack of transparencies, for ties between Swiss and Russian officials that was not clear, and also because these funds basically were returned to the account holders. What was the reaction at the end? We had an international response to this some years later in 2012, because US issued what is called now the Magnitsky Act, that can impose some sanction on the individuals that are involved in some abuses and corruption. And so this case at the end became a symbol for the fight against the corruption and the human rights abuses. Many other countries were inspired by this, and so issued other acts similar to this legislation in their country. And one of the countries that issued a similar act was also Latvia. I think that we as professionals, we need also to have to bear in mind some lesson learned from this case, and highlight some key points that are really important to fighting the corruption and money laundering. So first of all, the importance of transparency. The transparency means on the origin of the funds. We need also to create an international cooperation to track the illicit fund. We need a targeted sanction group-wide, so because it's important that the same sanction should be applied in many countries of jurisdiction. We need some enforcement mechanism and also a clear accountability in the governance. And first of all, the whistleblower protection, because in this case, Magnitsky reported, but at the end, he died. The US Helsinki Commission also tried to call some sanction against also the Swiss officials that were involved in this case. Then I would like just to remark in this next slide. Okay, so in this case gave us the opportunity to underline so this interconnection between corruption and money laundering. So for us is really crucial to have a culture, a proper culture with ML, because having implemented good standard, good methodologies, for sure these are protecting also from the corruption to flourish. And I think one of the most relevant battle that we need to define now is to share these common standard best practices that for sure are fed by our regulators and international organizations, but also following what was defined by the Financial Task Force. The country have some advantages for sure in implementing such standard, because for sure we can protect the integrity of public sector, because we need resources, I mean people who work there that are led by integrity for acting. We need to have we need to protect our private sector institution and How we can do this? We can do this having in place some adequate fit and proper mechanism, some adequate system of control where I include also training. We need to have also an adequate supervision from the authority. And a crucial part of this is for sure the transparency. That is one of the lessons learned from the previous case, where the main focus should be on the due diligence activity, the screening of the PEP, because the political exposed person are one of the high risk alert also for the bribery. And so it means just to have more attention in analyze this. And that is why for them we apply the enhanced due diligence. And then also what is important is also the record keeping system, because we need to cooperate also to facilitate the detection, the investigation and reporting of such crime. Then I believe that money laundering and corruption have really similar objective, and creating a strong ML program for sure is useful also to prevent corruption activity. So the synergy are the heart of this part. We need also to have in place strong mechanism and common mechanism interrelated, or as also our colleagues before mentioned, we need to adopt an holistic approach also in the executing assessment, performing controls, both ex ante for the due diligence and ex post as a second level control, boost the training and have adequate procedure in place. And what is really crucial is also the continuous cooperation among the structure in compliance and in financial crime that should be seen not as separate silos, but with this interrelated view. Now I leave the floor to my colleague Melissa Tavecchio that lead you in the model that we in generally adopted.
Thank you, Lara. And let me join you in thanking the organizer for inviting us and Generali. So myself, 2 words, I'm the anti-financial crime officer of the Central and Eastern Europe region within Generali. Generali as a group, it's quite wide. So we have group functions where Lara belongs to. And then we have regional and country organizations, and I belong to one of them. And then we have countries and legal entities, just for you to have an overview of how we are organized. And let me now basically translate into practice everything Lara just said. How do we do it in Generali? So everything starts with our risk appetite, which sets basically the level of depth, the guidance, through which we detect, prevent, and react to risks. And exactly as Lara was mentioning before, but also quoting my previous speakers, Karina specifically, we look at risks, money laundering, corruption, sanctions, from an holistic approach. And we identify the risk factors, we read them, we analyze them together by capturing the information that each of them can give it to us from a broad perspective, from an holistic perspective. And in the following slide, you can see how our framework, especially to tackle exactly this need to have an holistic approach, does not have a name anymore of AML, sanction, bribery, terrorist financing, but we speak about anti-financial crime in general. So our framework is really comprehensive. And also from a governance perspective, just to go back to that, in Generali, we call our officer AFC officer, because they really tackle all the risks holistically, also by nature. Our appointment letter specifically describe all the risks we tackle. And all of them were mentioned by Lara before and by myself earlier. In here, I just want to give you a snapshot of our framework that for sure was more exhaustively described by our colleague Karina earlier. I just want to shed light on two components, due diligence and risk assessment and controls, by already shedding light how the leitmotif below, for all of them, it's always like protecting our clients, organization, and business against corruption. And we do that with a strong code of conduct, with a political ethical approach of speaking up. We also have a whistleblowing reporting tool process, which protects our reporting people, just to ensure Krista is also comfortable with that. And really the concept behind is that we need to protect our business clients and reputation ultimately from corruption. And in the following slide, I will again shed light now more importantly on how do we do that. Let's explain how theory translates into practice. For sure, everyone is familiar with everything I will be saying, but I want to really focus on the key word already mentioned earlier by other speakers, which is holistically. So everything starts with data collection of data belonging to our clients, counterparties, through the forms applicable to them. In here, I use the word DD form, due diligence form, but everyone of you knows about know your client form, know your supplier form, all these forms that collect the data relevant to the party under investigation. As a second step, what do we do with all this data? Data are meaningless if not interpreted. So with the use of tools, more often automated in today's data-driven environment, which help us read the data and translate them in meaningful risks to be detected and mitigated. And this is where the holistic comes again, because all the tools you all know, screening, transaction monitoring, and so on and so forth, intrinsically, they are set up in a way that holistically look at the risks. The screening tool, for example, gets uploaded with different types of lists, PEP lists, adverse media lists, sanction lists, and so on and so forth. So with an alert, ultimately, you have a holistic investigation out of all the risks that you have lists uploading in your screening tool, of course. That's why lists need to be customized based on the risks you're exposed to. Same is applicable for transaction monitoring. And Karina was earlier explaining, you calibrate the logics based on the risks. And you may want to move from country, so, from where the transaction comes from, calibrated against the sector, calibrated against the typology of the client, and you set up your thresholds and logics in a way that is customized for your business. And this is basically how we read the risk. After that, after we have knowledge about the data, how they are interpreted and the risks we have, then we are ready to mitigate. And when it comes to client, we also have a supporting tool, let's call it this way, which is the customer risk rating, which I like to call it like a synthetic factor, synthetic tool that aggregates all the risks we have just been able to collect and interpret and give you a synthetic view of the profile of our client, also after having considered the country risk that typically in our business, it's considered as part of the customer risk rating, but it really depends. In some situation, it's embedded in the court system. They have some lists running in there. And so ultimately, you have your customer risk profile. This is the third step, thanks to which you then understand the depth of due diligence and the frequency of the due diligence you need to apply according to the exposure of the risk. This is a very basic description of the so-called risk-based approach. And let me also give you another hint. This is part of Generali Group as a peculiarity. We as a group, we are so large and systemic, let's say, that we thought that we also needed to go extra step. So we are able within the group to share across all the so-called relevant legal entities data belonging to the most high-risk countries, typically subject to EDD or some other logic we consider high risk. So that from a group perspective, we ensure the homogeneous and harmonic application of the due diligence, because countries who have shared clients can also interconnect to each other and share the information to ensure we have a holistic view from the risk perspective, but also from group perspective. In the following slide, we just wanted to, again, from a literature perspective, shed light on the one case typically considered as high risk to be paid attention and requiring enhanced due diligence and more frequent updates of information, which is a relationship involving a PEP, because you all know they are more exposed to corruption, bribery, embezzlement, and we need to make sure that our financial institutions are not exploited to typically launder the money coming from illicit proceeds. And as you all know, you do an EDD, and specifically we also do some more in-depth analysis tailored on this type of risk of the PEP. And across the several different things we may want to investigate in, we primarily and most importantly look at source of wealth, source of funds, destination of funds, that for us are looked at depending on in which side of the relationship the client is. If it's a policyholder, so injecting the money, we go and look at the source of wealth and source of funds. If the PEP is the beneficiary, we go and look at the destination of funds. So this is just the translation into in the insurance sector. And then you all know, you look at the adverse media to see whether there are any conviction, investigation that might have something to tell us about the relationship we are entering into. And then we look at the family members and close associates, because typically if a PEP is corrupted, involves some of their close people into their misconducts. In the following slide, we want to move out from what's the due diligence, typically a first line of defense duty, and let's say client and party centered, from a more company perspective of what's the risk. And as previously the other speakers were saying, ultimately everything starts from this risk assessment, because that's how companies understand the risk exposure they have based on their type of business, size, complexity. And they measure it against the framework they have in place to protect themselves against the risk that their business by nature entail. And ultimately, they see the residual risk. So this is the company picture of the risk. And thanks to that, our senior management then can take informed decision. How does that interconnect with the controls? To assess the vulnerability, the robustness of your internal control framework, of course, you look at your controls, among others, because of course, not only controls, we have training, we have policy and procedures, and so on and so forth. But you really use your controls from a design and implementation perspective. So how you design it, how you set it up, and how you effectively execute it, to measure whether you have robust controls and mitigants to protect your business. So this is how we do it in generally, and in the region, let me stress how risk assessment, controls, due diligence, the practical means are those that we really leverage on, because we really need to help locals in translating the theory into practice. That's why we are divided also into layers. And in the following slide, together with Lara, we just wanted to give you some closing messages from our side.
Okay, on top of the above, we urge just to consider that this session and what we have told you before is not just to show off our general skills and capabilities, or just analyze tough cases. But from my side, I would like to consider that is just a call to action, just to abandon the old and use approach of analyze the risk as pillars, as separate pillars for bribery, for money laundering and sanction. And for us, it's really important to have an interrelated view, as Melissa called before, an holistic approach, just to analyze this risk, because it's the only way to ensure an effective and prudential action to jointly fight financial crimes. This is crucial. And then, Melissa.
On this note, we have just a slogan: let's be partner in anti-financial crime across all stakeholders. For sure, the internal one, so our employees, but we as an insurance company also have a channel risk. Usually it's an external party. Brokers, agents are external parties. So we need to really have a robust training and culture to have them on board in fighting corruption and misconduct, but also clients, because by seeing us acting with integrity and with our slogans and sponsorship, they maybe are more inclined not to exploit us and use us maybe to commit crimes. So we hope we help you through our organization as well.
So thank you for attention. I saw some question appearing, so maybe I leave the floor to Laura and I stop sharing my desktop just to read them.
Thank you, ladies, for a valuable presentation emphasizing the importance of interagency cooperation, and thank you for telling us how risk assessment is done generally. And the question that we have, Gus?
Yes, we have one question. Do you have specific risk factor assessment systems in generally to flag Italian individuals having insurance policies, having high financial content that are formally headed by foreign fiduciary companies or other entities as potential money laundering activities? And also, how did you enhance these types of controls compared to the newest financial crime changing trends?
So Italian individuals having insurance policies, having high financial content that are formally headed by foreign fiduciary companies or other entities. Okay, so basically, how can I move out from the secrecy of fiduciary companies? Can I translate that like simplistically like this? Well, fiduciaries also have some degree of disclosure, not so much, but they do have. And it's a good question because, as Lara was mentioning beforehand, we are a financial conglomerate. So within our framework, we also do have fiduciaries and we do have banks and we do have policies offered to this typology. So everything starts from a good due diligence. So we do not have specific flag like in the Generali framework. Everything is available for everyone. But within the Italian regulation, we do have some degree of disclosure that it should be fulfilled with. And some of these elements are also contributing, as I was mentioning before, to the system through which we share high-risk parties. And if there is a high-risk element, that information of the Italian one gets anyhow reflected into the relationship, like respecting, of course, everything that should be respecting from a secrecy perspective. And then we can of course mitigate it. So I'm not sure whether I was able to simplistically answer, but we do have framework that, although not Italian specifically, so they get anyhow detected and shared at group level and considered at group level. And how did you enhance these types of controls compared to the newest financial crime changing trends? Although being very general as a question, well, I do see already how Generali is advanced into the way we really collect the data and use it not only in the Italian. That's why for me it's tough to think of it as an Italian thing. I, for example, Prague-based and speak with CE countries, and also Italian colleagues speak with all group countries around it because it's very interconnected. And that's why we share so much. We do not have silos approach, and we have group data sharing through which we share the data. And so this is how we overcome the challenges of having loopholes hidden into cross-border transaction or cross-country application of the rule, because we make it homogeneous through the data sharing. So I hope I answered.
Thank you, General Gru, for your presentation and answers. Let's move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. As the next speaker, we would like to introduce my colleague from FIU Latvia, Anna Jonikāne, who has extensive experience in conducting various strategic studies, including those related to development of corruption typology. Today, she will present on the following topic, strategic CCG, indicators of corruption and case analysis. Anna, floor is yours.
Yes, so yeah, will you please share the presentation? So yes, my name is Anna Jonikāne. I'm from Strategic and Tactical Analysis Division here in FIU Latvia. And I would like to tell you about this one study that we did back in 2021, but nonetheless, it is still relevant. And main idea is to basically share that cooperation mechanism or the approach of the working group that we used to come up with this study of indicators of corruption and case analysis. First things first. First, a couple of words about Latvian PPP, which is public and private partnership, which in Latvia we call it CCG, which is Cooperation Coordination Group. We have a precise and efficient legal basis since 2018, and at this point we have approximately 300 such meetings per year. One central authority in charge of the PPP is FIU Latvia. So we convene all those meetings regardless of who has initiated it. So the membership flexibility is also on the slide, and every one of those institutions can initiate for the PPP meeting, and FIU Latvia is responsible to convene it. It can be convened either remotely or in person in FIU Latvia premises. We have a dedicated authorized person who is in charge. So there is one contact point for everybody, for reporting entities and law enforcement authorities to know where to turn for that. And for the PPP meetings that are conducted virtually, we have a dedicated secure virtual platform that is hosted inside of FIU Latvia. So it's also very comfortable and easy to convene it virtually. Yes, as I mentioned previously, so membership flexibility, it is FIU Latvia, it is any law enforcement authority, it is any public prosecutor, any supervisory authority, any reporting entity, as well as tax authority. So based on the need and necessity, it is convened and organized on case by case basis as needed. So anyone from the AML community basically can initiate and be part of a PPP. Also, FIU Latvia as a central authority is also in charge of basically acts as a secretariat in a way, being in charge of the meeting minutes and following up on any decisions that are made within those meetings for any further action needed. It is a very efficient mechanism since PPP meetings can be convened even within an hour. Of course, normally it is not that urgent, but if it is, it can be dealt with it in a very urgent, immediate manner. And those PPP meetings or working groups sometimes they support operational, strategic, and feedback types of meetings. So feedback meetings is something that we conduct on an annual basis with all of the supervisory authorities. So we would inform them about the reporting trends and reporting quality of their supervised sectors, and then the expectation would be that this information would further be given to the respective sectors. And also we give a direct feedback meetings to the reporting entities that file for the most STRs. So we meet with them directly ourselves, and that is a very good way how to build trust and collaboration that is later on very helpful for strategic working groups. That is also a topic of my presentation, as well as operational exchanges. Our colleague from Swedbank also mentioned the operational PPP meetings that are very effective as well. And in fact, those are most of the meetings, approximately 70% of all of the PPP meetings are of an operational basis. But as per the topic of today's presentation, so PPP outputs of the strategic analysis, we have already several such PPPs that are working, that are based on the working group basis. And the first one of them were the indicators of corruption and case analysis, which I will tell you more in detail in the next slides. But here a little bit about the approach. So all these three that are on the slide, two of them are publicly available documents that are available for all of you in our webpage. And they come from either the, so the relevant risks that are identified by FIU or that we identify ourselves, or from NRA. We would decide, what is the immediate need of some indicator material or broadening the understanding of particular risks. And the latest ones that we created were regarding the sanctions evasion, and then also in regards to tax offenses. But the first one, as I mentioned, was in regarding corruption. And the approach here is that we would have a working group involving, so to say, all the links of the chain of the AML system. So it starts with the reporting entities. In our case, it was the largest credit institutions. Then it's FIU Latvia. Then it's the respective law enforcement agency that would deal with the respective predicate offense and receive the FIU Latvia disseminations of the content, and also prosecutor's office where it's relevant. Okay, and so we'll move forward to the PPP on indicators of corruption and money laundering. So the background of the PPP working group is that, as I mentioned, in the NRA that we published in 2020, corruption was indicated as one of the main threats nationally. So we realized that some extra activity in regards to preventing and combating of corruption might be in place. It also fell with the same timeline as recommendations provided by the FATF, as well as it was put in our anti-money laundering action plan. And another interesting thing that when we started to basically prepare for this working group, we also did our analysis, and we saw that there is a substantial amount of FIU disseminations going to the Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau, but not so many STRs that we receive have already the indication of corruption case. And of course, in very many cases, it can be completely understandable, because on the bank side, a lot of situations without a particular intel information that might only be at the disposal of FIU or a law enforcement agency, this case might look just like a money laundering scheme. So it is normal that maybe in some cases, we would be that link necessary that identifies this particular case being a corruption case. But still, we thought that there could be maybe place for improvement. So yeah, that was another background that we saw not so many STRs with this indication of corruption, and we thought that we might look for ways to maybe increase that. Yeah, and so the participants of the working group were FIU Latvia, Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau, which is a law enforcement agency responsible for those crimes, Prosecutor General's Office, and 4 largest credit institutions in Latvia, with the largest exposure to PEPs was one of the reasons. And another reason was that those STRs that we did receive that had the corruption indication came from these banks. So we knew that they have scenarios that are working scenarios that have where they have identified cases and suspicions that link to corruption cases. Yeah, and so the main goals of this PPP working group was developing this material in defining risk indicators or typologies that would help not only banks or credit institutions, but pretty much all of the reporting entities to identify corruption related crimes, as well as just by having all these meetings promote common understanding of threats and risks that corruption as itself can cause. And the way it was organized was basically we had 4 or 5 meetings, and in every meeting, every one of this link of this chain of AML system, as I called it previously, basically presented their controls or scenarios or indicators that they can see on their side. So it was presentations from credit institution side, from FIU, from CPCB, and also from the Prosecutor General's Office. Okay, and then moving forward, this material so consists of 2 chapters. The first chapter is indicators that may indicate corruption and case studies from the perspective of foreign and international organizations. So we, at first, we also looked at what has been already identified by Egmont Group, FATF, OECD. And second chapter, that was compiled based on the indicators that we saw starting from the banks, then indicators from FIU reports that were disseminated to CPCB. Those, of course, in some instances included those indicators that were already identified by banks, but in many cases it was many additional indications. And then law enforcement agency also identified and substituted this material with the indicators that were identified on their side, especially those that did not originate from FIU dissemination. So in that case, that was brand new information, almost, so to say, also for FIU and also for the banks. So every next chain or the participant were able to contribute by showing some typologies or indicators that the previous link would not be able to see. And in often cases, that is maybe something that financial system can't even detect in general. But even in those cases, it was very interesting for us and for credit institutions to see and maybe think a little bit outside of the box to see how it can help in future in calibrating those risk scenarios. And and so this second chapter insists, so all of those, when we saw all of those indicators, we split them in 3 main groups. And those could be called as elements that basically makes these cases a corruption case, because a lot of those indicators that we see without a specific link to public procurement or foreign PEPs and foreign bribery, or maybe bad publicity in regards to that, or suspicious transactions involving PEPs. Otherwise, these, I mean, national PEPs in this last case, in many cases, these would just seem like money laundering cases, but these were those elements that that basically shows or links more to the corruption suspicions. And so next slide is a little case study and suspicions in regarding to those particular suspicions and typologies identified. So in regards to public procurement, in the material we had a case study that in a short period of time, company A has won 3 procurements on the same public body as the sole applicant. Procurement procedures were carried out with the support of the EU Cohesion Fund. The total amount of payments received from municipal companies were several million euro, and one of the members of the management board of the procurement commissioning public body was also the owner of the main business partner of the company A, company B. And then the suspicions identified that we could call in the sense of this material either typology or an indicator, where that company A is the only applicant, or as a typology, any company is the only applicant winner in the procurements of one contracting authority in a short period of time, which raises suspicions of corruption. Further movement of company A's funds consists of payments, some of which had been made without a logical economic and or legal justification, possibly in order to artificially increase the prices of projects. And the company B, which is related to the procurement winner, has withdrawn a large amount of funds from the company's account. So this was one of the case in regards to the public procurement. In regards to foreign bribery, there was a case study that the account in a Latvian credit institution owned by an offshore company was used to launder funds obtained by the 2 PEPs from a country with a higher corruption risk. The activity in the credit institution's account indicated money laundering stages of layering and integration. And and suspicions identified were that the company's ultimate beneficial owner was a former high-level government official. Transactions to the company's account were not characteristic to the company's economic activity. Part of the funds from the company's account were related to a fictitious loan agreement. There were inconsistencies in the explanation regarding the flow of funds, and there was a publicly available information about U.S. law enforcement investigations into bribery of U.S. companies involving the mentioned offshore company. And also another thing to mention, that in this material, we of course put in a disclaimer that of course not any single typology or indicator would mean or in some instances even linked to the corruption case or money laundering case. So it is always the assessment of a reporting entity to understand or try to understand the fuller picture as possible. But of course, one of the best ways how to learn is from the case studies and those indications. And then one example in regards to domestic suspicious transactions involving domestic PEPs, a government official has transferred large sums to a family member's account in a short period of time, defining it as a loan repayment, and a gift. The official is authorized to handle this family member's account, which is not used for everyday purposes, and only accumulate these funds. And of course, a big suspicion that CPCB has already initiated criminal proceedings, but that's of course not always known to maybe credit institutions or other reporting entities. And during the 3-year period, the official had received a salary from the municipality and the municipal company, which do not generate as much money as the mentioned transfers to the family member's account. So unexplained wealth indication. Another member of the official's family was the former head of the relevant municipal office, and no other official income is declared to the tax authority. So yeah, quickly, these case studies, just to show you a little bit what the content was that we came up with in the end of this working group. Yes, and so the main conclusions, which is something that I already kind of touched upon previously, but yeah, one of the findings was that those indicators defined in Latvia largely complied with the ones defined globally that we found in this chapter 1. Also, that corruption risk controls set by credit institutions largely complied with those globally and locally defined and identified throughout this project. Also, yeah, due to Latvia's former status as a regional financial center, foreign bribery was a crucial form of corruption, and to a smaller extent still is. We still can detect it in Latvia. And yeah, what was especially interesting were the indicators that were not identified by obliged entities themselves or by the FIU, for example, that came from the Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureaus that basically allowed us to look at these indicators from unseen perspective. And of course, organizing PPP working groups and creating a common material like that increases collaboration and also trust and strengthens the relationship also for example, future operational collaboration if necessary. And one thing that I forgot to put on the slide also, we did see after this material was publicized, we did see increase in the STRs from reporting entities that did have this indication that there might be suspicion regarding the corruption. So that was also a very nice outcome on top of everything else that I already mentioned. So yeah, I think that would be it. Thank you for your attention, and maybe you have a question or two for me.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat room, actually. David is asking, are there different indicators or approaches towards cross-country corruption compared to in-country corruption? If yes, what are the differences?
Yeah, well, of course, that one main and maybe the most obvious one is the involvement of persons, legal persons, natural persons that are foreign. And as in the example that I mentioned, especially if these are PEPs. And of course, if we see that in these schemes, in trying to maybe these possibly illicit funds to move them away from the origin or from the Latvia, of course, also in national cases, the foreign credit institutions or financial institutions could be used, but also in many cases, use of foreign financial systems can be of an indication that it is a foreign bribery case. But yeah, it would again be a case-by-case situation that should be assessed in order to understand that better.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
And now we have come to the point where I must also introduce Edgars, who will give you an insightful presentation on financial intelligence. Please.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I'll just share my presentation. So, good day, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name is Edgars Zadiņš, and I'm a transaction analyst at the first financial division of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia. Today, I will give you an overview of financial intelligence, how we freeze illegally acquired funds, and real-life case studies related to foreign corruption. This presentation will highlight FIU's Latvia role in detecting, analyzing, and combating financial crimes through intelligence gathering and cooperation with law enforcement agencies. Today, I will cover the following key areas: the role and function of FIU Latvia, financial intelligence and freezing of illicit funds, cooperation between FIU Latvia and law enforcement agencies, and case studies on financial crime. FIU Latvia plays a key role in fighting financial crime, especially money laundering, terrorism financing, and the financing of weapons proliferation. Mainly, we work under Latvia's anti-money laundering law, known as the Law on the Prevention of Money Laundering and Terrorism and Proliferation Financing. We also work in close cooperation with supervisory institutions, financial entities, and law enforcement agencies. Our main functions include receiving and analyzing suspicious transaction reports, conducting financial intelligence and operational analysis, freezing illicit funds, cooperating with law enforcement agencies, and supporting criminal investigations which are related to financial crime. Mainly, our work follows a risk-based approach, ensuring that high-risk cases receive immediate attention. The main risks we address include proceeds from criminal offenses committed abroad, domestic crime, and foreign criminal offenses affecting Latvia. Regarding domestic crime, one of our units primarily focuses on money laundering related to corruption and abuse of official power. We also pay close attention to financial transactions involving politically exposed persons, known also as PEPs. To better manage these risks, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia has developed guidelines for assessing the risk associated with PEPs, their family members, and close associates, as required by law. PEPs are considered at higher risk for money laundering due to their influence in public sector, which can potentially be exploited for personal gains. Managing these risks is closely linked to operational analysis, and a little bit later in this presentation I will provide more detailed information how we conduct operational analysis. Here you can see the main structure of Latvia's anti-money laundering system. Latvia's anti-money laundering system is built on a strong legal framework and includes supervisory and control institutions, obliged entities, law enforcement agencies, and prosecutor offices and courts. FIU Latvia gathers and analyzes STR from various sources, including banks, accountants, insurance companies, gambling operators, and others. Operational analysis is a key step in financial intelligence. It involves identifying suspicious transactions, conducting an in-depth analysis using multiple databases, freezing funds when there is reasonable suspicion about crime, and also sharing findings with law enforcement agencies. FIU Latvia, in addition, can issue freezing orders based on suspicious transaction reports, also requests from foreign institutions or independent investigations. For example, an investigation may be started on FIU's own initiative. This can happen, for example, if information about corruption or bribery in public administration becomes publicly available from news or journalistic research. As a very important part of FIU Latvia work process, I would like to mention operational analysis, which is a key step in financial intelligence. The process starts when STR from bank is flagged and sent to Financial Intelligence Division. Here's how we handle a case. The first step is to escalate a case proposal. Usually STR received from the bank serves as the basis for this case proposal. These reports comes to Financial Intelligence Division for in-depth analysis, where it is added to FIU Latvia main analysis system, which is called GoAML, or further processing. Next step is to assign the case to an analyst to examine suspicious transaction. For example, it could be me. The analyst further gathers data from multiple sources, like account register, register of enterprise, land register, vehicle register, and other systems. Also, if needed, the analyst can request data from local or foreign institutions. By foreign institutions, I mean other financial intelligence units. After that, we create a visual analyzing using IBM i2 Analyst Notebook, which helps map connections between involved parties and illustrate suspicious transactions. Also, I would like to highlight this program in particular because it greatly enhances an analyst's daily work. In the past, achieving these goals required using the inefficient Microsoft Excel charts or even manually drawing diagrams on paper, which was highly impractical and time-consuming. As next step for operational analysis is usually an internal department meeting, which is held to decide on next steps, including possible freezing orders. If the case is complex, a cooperation coordination group meeting may be held with law enforcement agencies before sending an intelligence report. If there is a reasonable suspicion of crime, then we send our reports to law enforcement agencies. Basically, there are three types of conclusions which we disseminate. First one and main one is conclusion of the competent authority. The FIU reports to law enforcement agencies to them to initiate criminal proceedings, which can be after that used as evidence. This information raises reasonable suspicion that the person has committed a criminal offense, including money laundering, terrorism financing, or crimes related, for example, to corruption. Second one is risk information reports. These reports are mainly used for law enforcement information in their own competence, but in specific cases, criminal proceedings also can be initiated. And last but not least, there's also additional information reports, which are basically supplementary reports for ongoing cases. These reports contain information related to previously disseminated conclusions of the competent authority. As I mentioned before, FIU Latvia has the authority to issue freezing orders when there are reasonable suspicion of financial crimes. These orders apply to all forms of criminal proceeds, including financial instruments, property, and converted assets. Recently, about last 5 to 6 years, our unit's main focus has been on standalone money laundering cases, where the person is charged with money laundering, even if the ongoing criminal, or even if the original criminal crime is unknown. This is often linked to Latvia's past as regional financial center. They were largely based on circumstantial evidence indicating the criminal origin of assets, money laundering typologies and indicators, as well as the individual's inability to prove the legal origin of assets. So the assets can be confiscated if evidence suggests they likely come from criminal activity, and person involved in criminal proceedings is not able to explain the legality of origin of relevant assets like funds, property, etc. In most disseminated standalone cases, the source of funds is linked to money flow from countries like Russian Federation, Ukraine, Belarus, and other Commonwealth of Independent States countries, where identifying the predicate offense is mostly impossible. Additionally, there is possibility that these crimes may be not investigated in those countries. So, in my opinion, one of the most crucial aspects of FIU Latvia's work is cooperation between FIU Latvia and other law enforcement agencies. FIU Latvia works closely with law enforcement through Cooperation Coordination Group to ensure efficient information exchange. But I won't delve into the details of CCG as my colleague Anna has already provided an in-depth explanation in her previous presentation. So here you can see how FIU Latvia is maintaining public-private partnership platform. This is the way how we exchange information on money laundering cases, including attempts thereof or information on related crimes and suspicious transactions. However, I would like to provide more information about what is Operational Center, also known as OPCEN. Operational Center is a specially designed room located in the FIU Latvia's office, where you can do following things, and which consists of we have physical co-working space for experts to work simultaneously. We have secure information exchange. We also have centralized data stream and joint investigation opportunities. We also have coordinated intelligence sharing, and we minimize duplication of work. And so here are 3 case studies showcasing FIU's Latvia's work. First case study is related to foreign embezzlement using complex laundromat scheme. In this case, a professional money laundering network used shell companies and bank accounts to disguise illicit funds. Main typology for this case study was that a professional money laundering network facilitated fund transfers via shell companies, masking illicit origin through fictitious transactions. Funds were structured to appear legitimate, including through fraudulent loans and investments. The key findings of this investigation from FIU Latvia were that funds were transferred through fictitious transactions and fake loans, numerous suspicion transactions reported by Latvian credit institutions, shell companies who lacked real business activity. There was transactions involved weakly regulated jurisdictions, media reports linked individuals to corruption, and transactions also indicated large structured transit payments with no economic justification and circular fund flows. FIU Latvia analyzed these transactions, froze around 20 million euros in assets, and provided intelligence to the Latvian state police, leading to multiple criminal investigations. Second case study is foreign bribery and money laundering. A major bribery and laundering operation was uncovered involving Ukrainian officials. The main typology here was that shell company accounts facilitated the movements of illicit funds through fictitious transactions, distancing them from the criminal origin. Our investigation revealed that shell companies in non-European Union jurisdiction, for example, British Virgin Islands, Hong Kong, Nevis, were used to hide illicit funds. A large round figure transfer suggested money laundering, lack of supporting documents and links to corruption. There was also publicly available negative information on the main individual involved in this scheme. His initials were AL, and AL were linked to large-scale corruption, arms trafficking, and even racketeering in Ukraine. And the cherry on the top was the revelation that since August 31st, 2021, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine has declared the key suspect, AL, wanted on suspicion of multiple criminal offenses under Ukrainian criminal code. These include the theft of state-owned real estate, bribery of state and municipal officials, and large-scale money laundering of illicit funds. And then throughout financial intelligence and cooperation with Ukrainian authorities, FIU Latvia issued freezing orders and disseminated findings leading to start of criminal investigation here in Latvia by Latvian Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau. And the third case would be in a little bit local nature. It was fraud against the European Union financial interests, misuse of European Union funds. We found out that fake transactions inflated project costs, nominee directors hid real beneficiaries, false subcontractors made financial tracing difficult, and procurement documents contained inconsistencies and forged documents. FIU Latvia's analysis led to a report to the European Public Prosecutor's Office, known as EPO, which started criminal proceedings for large-scale fraud and money laundering. So in conclusion, I think these case studies highlighted FIU's Latvia role in preventing financial crime, freezing assets linked to illegal activities, working with law enforcement to ensure justice, and moving forward, we aim to strengthen international cooperation, use advanced analytics for better detection, and improve legal framework for asset recovery. Thank you for attention, and I'm happy to answer any question if there is one.
Thank you, Edgars. Very detailed, interesting presentation. There is one question in the chat. In regards to Russian frozen assets, are the confiscations continuing, or is it a phenomenon that is slowing down? And how are the frozen assets used?
It is slowing down. Most of these assets were frozen by some of our credit institutions under liquidation. And these credit institutions' main business model was to serve non-resident clients from these countries. So confiscation are continuing, but it is slowing down because lots of these assets are already seized and frozen. So that's the case for now.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on to our next speaker, Renārs Reiniks, who is here representing the Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau of Latvia, also one of our closest allies. Please, Renārs, over to you.
All right, this is the structure of my presentation. I have divided it in 4 sections. We'll have introductions and 2 case studies, and we will end with conclusions. Next slide, please. Anyway, I would like to start by saying a few words about the Bureau. Bureau is the leading anti-corruption authority of the country and is completely independent body under supervision of Cabinet of Ministers, but the supervision is very limited. Given that Bureau is an investigative body, our activity is supervised by Office of Prosecutor General. And our work is based on 3 pillars: enforcement, education, and prevention. We're also entitled to conduct criminal intelligence activities and pretrial investigations in relation to corruption offenses. Next, please. These are all the crimes which fall under our competence. Most common crimes investigated by us, of course, are bribe taking, money laundering, bribe giving, abuse of official authority, and in recent years we see quite many cases regarding disclosing of non-disclosable information, when information is conveyed to other persons from databases available to public officials, or in some cases it has been information regarding procurements conveyed to potential bidders. As you see, we also deal with illegal financing of political parties and pre-election campaigning. Next slide, please. So in continuation of my presentation, I'm going to present you 2 cases which demonstrate why collaboration between private and public sector is important to detect possible corruption early. And even if the initial information is not identified by credit institution, but by law enforcement agency, it is still important that private sector and public sector collaborate effectively. Next, please. In April 2022, we received a suspicious transaction report from FIU, which indicated on possible bribery and fraudulent activity in relation to procurement carried out by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine with involvement of Latvian company. Money more than 1 million euros was received in the bank account of Latvian company, which was the first payment according to the agreement between company and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Moreover, it was a prepayment to the company, although none of the supplies were delivered yet. Justification of this transaction, copy of the agreement submitted by the Latvian company to the credit institution. Total amount of the contract was more than 13 million euros, and goods to be delivered by Latvian company were rigid armor plates and bulletproof vests, which should protect Ukrainian soldiers in the battlefield. Should be noted that all the military goods should be delivered by April 2022, although contract was concluded only in March 2022, which of course raises questions about ability of the company to deliver all the goods in such a short time frame. Next, please. This is the initial money flow. After Latvian company received money in its bank account, so you can see that more than 900,000 euros were transferred to the company in Turkey, which, as we learned, was involved in the delivery of military goods as well. Next one, please. These are things which raised suspicions and drew our attention. Signs of fictitious documents submitted to the bank were identified. It was established that price increase for one of the items which should be delivered was more than 4 times. So I mean, the idea of conducting business, of course, is to earn money, but price increase more than 4 times raise many questions. Also, we learned that owner of Latvian limited liability company previously has been convicted in our neighbor country, Lithuania, for fraud. Again, should be noted that neither Latvian company nor Turkish company produced the military goods by themselves, because the area of their activity is completely different. In addition, we had reasons to believe that goods are bought from a Turkish company, which allegedly does not exist anymore, because according to documents submitted to the credit institution, it was indicated the Turkish company has a website, but cross-checking this information was established that such website does not exist anymore. However, there was available historical website of the company, according to which company's areas of activity were petrochemical raw materials, petroleum products, export and packaging of tea, electricity, and electronics. So, and it has nothing to do with producing the military goods. Next, please. These are the actions which were taken after receiving the suspicious transaction report. The criminal case was commenced in relation to criminal offenses of bribery and fraud because of suspicion that representatives of Latvian company allegedly gave bribes to officials of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine to win the procurement. Coordination group meeting was convened with the help of FIU. This was already mentioned, the coordination group meeting was already mentioned by previous speaker. Just to remind you that that's a coordination group meeting is a meeting between law enforcement agency, FIU, and credit institution, which allows to exchange with information directly, get additional information if necessary, and discuss further collaboration. And since it was implemented back in 2018, we find it as a really powerful tool. In addition, special investigative measures such as physical surveillance and wiretapping were approved by the court. We also reached out to our counterpart in Ukraine, which is National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, to let them know what we have detected and to coordinate our actions. After coordination of the actions with our counterpart, we carried out searches at the homes and workplaces of potential suspects. In addition, accounts of the legal entity in Latvia were arrested. Next, please. These are the findings of this investigation. During the investigation, it was established that the Ukrainian citizen, with the support of board member of Latvian company, allegedly defrauded more than 1 million euros from the budget of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. To ensure the conclusion of the contract, Latvian company misled the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine regarding the ability to deliver the equipment in accordance with the contract. To guarantee the transfer of financial resources to Latvian company, Ukrainian public officials included a 100 prepayment clause in the agreement, thereby abusing their position and allowing to receive financial resources from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine before the delivery of goods. Anyway, I have to admit that we did not obtain any clear evidence that public officials would have been bribed in Ukraine by Latvian company. Nevertheless, considering that all the events took place on the territory of Ukraine, the case was sent to our counterpart in Ukraine for further investigation. And in addition, you can see that more than 180,000 euros were seized in the bank account of the Latvian company. Next, please. This is a case study number 2. At the end of October 2022, we received a report from a company's accountant who had received a message from an anonymous person saying that for a little gratitude, he can ensure that company will win a tender in one of the municipalities. Message was sent from a prepaid SIM card, which did not allow us to track down the sender of the message. Total amount of a tender was 60,000 euros. And what made this story credible is that indeed company the accountant works for participates in a municipality tender. Same time, what surprises us is that person is brave enough to send that kind of message to the bidder, knowing that he could be reported to the authorities. Next slide, please. These are the actions taken after receiving the report about possible bribe solicitation. The criminal case started immediately. Special investigative measures, including investigative experiment, was approved by the court. Under our instructions, accountant engaged in the chat with the unknown person, and we learned that bribe amount is 400 euros, which should be transferred to a specific bank account. And this is a time again for bank to be involved, because we have a bank account number to which money should be transferred, and we need more information about the holder of this bank account. So the coordination group meeting was convened with the help of FIU to exchange with information about account holder. After receiving information from the bank, we established that he is not identified as a member of any public procurement commission. He has no criminal records. He is not a public official, and there are no suspicious transactions in his bank account. At first glance, it seems the case is almost solved, because we know the account to which bribe should be transferred, and basically we know who will be the receiver of money. So he was our potential suspect at that moment. However, an unpredicted twist was awaiting us. Next slide, please. After detention of potential suspect, which is, of course, the guy or the owner of the bank account to which money was transferred, we realized that we are basically back to square one, because he was not related to solicitation of the bribe. It turned out that he was selling the drone through the advertisement website. And after he received money which was transferred to his bank account by us, he sent the drone to the buyer, which is basically our anonymous guy, through a parcel delivery service. Good thing is we had detected bribe solicitation scheme, because now we know that perpetrator sends messages to the potential bidders, and same time he's looking for the goods to buy through the advertisement website. And when the person he's texting to has agreed to transfer money as a bribe, he sends the account number of the seller, and after seller has received money, parcel with the needed item is sent through the parcel delivery service. Just to be clear, the intent of the perpetrator was not to get money, but he was getting the goods. He bought them through the advertisement website, and they were delivered by parcel delivery service. So this is a way how he avoided detection. Same time, we received one more signal about possible bribe solicitation. It was a WhatsApp message with the similar text and request for a little gratitude. Person who submitted the report was collaborating with us, and under our instructions, he engaged in the conversation with our anonymous guy. This time, the amount of bribe was 300 euros, which again should be sent to the specified account. And this was again the right moment when a bank should be involved in the collaboration repeatedly, because we have another bank account. Could you go to next slide, please? So this time we learned that person was selling silver coins through the advertisement website. We approached the seller of these coins, and we approached also parcel delivery service to set a trap. Under our instructions, the seller of the coins sent the message to our anonymous guy that he has received money, and parcel is on its way to the buyer, basically to our guy. And when he came to the parcel pickup point, he was finally detained. Next slide, please. So these are the results of this investigation. It turned out that the person sending anonymous messages is an ordinary guy, currently not working. His previous workplace had been company participating in different tenders. So he knew a lot about procurement procedures, how to find who are the bidders, and all the relevant information concerning procurement. It was found out that he sent out number of WhatsApp messages attempting to receive bribes from multiple companies, bought goods from advertisements, and sent the account information of the sellers to receive money. Bribe amount varied from 300 to 500 euros. And you can see that two legal entities also were banned on participating in state or local government procurement procedures, because they had already sent money to the suspect as a bribe. And in total, 6 episodes of bribe solicitation and instigation to bribery were identified. Next one. And last but not least, these are the key points from my perspective, to successful early detection of corruption, because collaboration between law enforcement agencies and banks is essential for detecting, preventing, and prosecuting financial crimes, as well as crimes related to corruption. Moreover, secure and timely communication between banks and law enforcement agencies helps to track illicit financial flows and identify corrupt individuals or organizations. What I want to highlight is know your customer and due diligence, which are critical components in the financial and business sectors, aimed at preventing fraud, money laundering, and other illicit activities, including corruption. I think these two cases show how important is collaboration between public and private sector to react quickly in terms of exchange of information, which speeds up the investigation of corruption cases. That's actually all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Renars, for your presentation. It was definitely good to learn more about how Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau works as well.
Yes, we actually have one question. What lessons were learned about identifying corruption in similar cases, as you just presented with complex international transaction and potential shell companies? I think need to repeat that, or?
Sorry?
You get the question? Yes, I don't need to repeat it.
Yes, no. I heard it. So I think it's always important to pay attention to every significant detail when you receive a suspicious transaction report, especially if, let's say, your companies from your country are involved in business deals with former Soviet Union countries, or let's say third countries. What I mentioned in one of my examples, it was Ukraine. So I think that's a matter of comprehensive investigation, and you always have to try to find the truth, what has happened, because as it was mentioned in the first example, when Latvian company was dealing with Ukrainian with Ukraine, there were a lot of red flags, and you should always pay attention to all of them.
Thank you, Renars. That would be all, and let's move to our next presenter. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Nadine Oskanli, who is representing the International Security Bureau of the Ministry of the Interior of Latvia. She will be providing us with an in-depth presentation today on the role of the International Security Bureau in the anti-corruption framework of the Republic of Latvia. Nadine, the floor is yours.
Hello, could you confirm that you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you well.
Good, then I will try to share my screen. You have to stop share the previous presentation, I think. Okay, so I'll try. Entire screen. So I hope you see. Yes?
Yes, we see your presentation.
Very good. So, dear participants and organizers of the this online seminar, Firstly, I would let me please express my gratitude for the possibility to participate in this event and for such an interesting and relevant topics discussed here today. As I am the last speaker before the coffee break, I will try to precisely stick to the time given to me. So once more, my name is Nadine Oskanli. I'm the head of the strategic planning department of the Internal Security Bureau. And my department deals not only with strategic planning, but also with operational and strategic crime analysis. And we are also responsible for the international cooperation in our bureau. Some words for myself. I have almost 20 years of experience in crime analysis in different law enforcement authorities, such as State Police, Corruption Prevention and Combating Bureau, and now, last 9 years, I have spent in Internal Security Bureau. So, okay. As you saw from previous presentations, in Latvia, there are several anti-corruption authorities. So Corruption Preventing and Combating Bureau is the main leading specialized anti-corruption authority, which also play a main role in coordinating the corruption prevention and corruption trend analysis. Internal Security Bureau detects, investigate, and prevent all type of crimes, including corruption. So crimes committed by the officials of the subordinating institutions of the Ministry of Interior. And from the 1st January of this year, our competence has been widened to investigate also all type of crimes committed by the officials from the prison administration. So in some general numbers, so from the 1st November 2015, the day when the Internal Security Bureau was established, till this year, our institution had investigated more than 900 criminal cases, from which approximately 40% are crimes committed by the officials while on their duties, so including corruption. And more than 500 officials have been prosecuted, and more than 200 officials also have been convicted. And about 140 cases are still ongoing on the court. Speaking of the most common elements of the corruption in criminal cases, which has been investigated by the Internal Security Bureau, we have to speak about administrative and high-level corruption. So, in cases related to administrative corruption, there are small but regular bribes which are taken by the lower level officials, and according to the national risk assessment, these crimes has lower risk of the money laundering. So bribes are used to cover daily expenses, for example, groceries, trips, or some other expenses that covers daily needs. Such type of corruption makes negative impact on public safety because of the inappropriate or illegal decisions made by the officials on such areas as traffic safety, where we can speak about non-application of administrative penalties on speeding or drunk drivers, and also decisions on area of fire safety or other public order. So these decisions directly impact safety of the individuals. There is also administrative corruption on such area as illegal border crossing, but it is more, as we think, it is more related to the national safety in general than safety of the individual. If we speak about the profile of the perpetrator in these cases, then it would be a man in age of 40s who have been on duties for about 15 years and who have had some disciplinary sanctions while on duties before. If we speak about high-level corruption, in last couple of years, Internal Security Bureau has investigated more than 10 cases related to so-called kleptocracy. So on high level, it would be like high-level corruption in the institutions subordinated under the Ministry of Interior. Such corruption makes negative impact on national safety. Most of cases are related to the public procurement, and as a result of these criminal activities, low quality goods and services were purchased. For example, I think this case was publicly available. A low quality fence was purchased and installed on the Latvian eastern border. It was meant to protect Latvia from illegal migration, and it also impacts the risk related to hybrid threats from Belarus and Russia. And as a result of these criminal cases, we see that there are some changes in field of the procurement in Ministry of Interior. We see that procedures now are more transparent, and we see also that companies perform changes on inconsistency of goods or provided services at their own expenses, and we think that this is good change what we see. About real estate sector, so we would like to draw attention to this sector, which is particularly relevant concerning the laundering of proceeds from crime committed by the corrupt officials. These risks have also been highlighted in the National Risk Assessment Report, and for those who want to get more information, this is page 45-49. In general, it is important to emphasize that criminals in Latvia tend to avoid using traditional bank services for money laundering, as the internal control systems of the credit institutions registered in Latvia are effective and capable of identifying such illegal activities. However, the Internal Security Bureau will present an example providing insights into potential red flags that should be considered when assessing a state official's competence or on planning real estate purchase using banking services, especially mortgage. So in this example, you can see how criminals purchase real estate using a mortgage. The initial origin of the down pay from this down payment consists of small transactions from relatives, friends, or some small cash deposits. And we can see that these transactions can be sent as a gift or as a loan or debt. And such transactions do not immediately raise obvious suspicions for the bank. But this is just a tip of the iceberg. For financial sector, we would like to highlight those two questions or red flags, which we have also identified in our cases. Like, is there any indication of possible structuring, and what are the sources of the down pay? So, in fact, the funds obtained as a result of corruption can be used to cover obligations toward individuals who transfer the funds, as well as to cover monthly expenses related to household expenditures. And the legal incomes, such as salary, often are used to cover the mortgage. Therefore, attention should be paid to the account of public official, and we presume that the lack of payment related to household expenses should be considered as a red flag. And as I see from previous speakers, according to the Swedbank presentation on their typology related to the bribery and corruption, I saw that this was already mentioned there. So our larger bank in Latvia has already identified such a risk. And in next slide, regarding cooperation with the credit institutions in the anti-money laundering field, we would like to highlight the regularity framework in Latvia. So firstly, the new law from 1st July 2022 on data exchange with credit institutions provide the opportunity to receive unified structured data from credit institutions, and it let us to do data analysis more quickly and effectively. And secondly, law on prevention of money laundering and terrorism and proliferation financing gives the possibility to cooperate at an operational level. So during investigations within the framework of public-private partnership. So in urging complex cases, we do use this public-private partnership, and we see its effectiveness. So thank you for your attention. Here you can see the possible contacts for international cooperation, and also there is information about our website, but I have to admit that till now it is still on Latvian, but it is our goal for near future to have also translate our homepage in English. Thank you for your attention, and I will try to answer the questions if there are such.
Thank you, Nadine, for your interesting presentation. So there is one question. Given the focus on real estate and the challenges of identifying illicit funds, how does the Internal Security Bureau collaborate with other anti-corruption authorities, like, for example, KNAB and credit institutions through the data exchange channel and public-private partnership to specially target and prevent crime committed by officials from the subordinate institutions of the Ministry of the Interior and Prison Administration?
So thank you for your question. So data exchange channels is effective tool how we can get structured data from various credit institutions in identical format. So this helps us to conduct money flow analysis within the minutes of instead of hours or days, what was before, if you get data which are submitted in different formats and structures. So more effectiveness it is possible now. As for cooperation with other law enforcement agencies, as mentioned in money laundering cases, we cooperate very closely with Corruption Combating and Prevention Bureau and other law enforcement authorities and FIU, and if necessary, directly with private sector such as banks. We cannot publicly reveal our methods. However, we can say that public-private cooperation mechanism in Latvia is effective, and we highly appreciate our cooperation.
Thank you for your answer. That's it, I think. Thank you for your presentation. And we now forward are moving to coffee break. I think we will take a break until 3 o'clock by Central European time and 4 o'clock to Eastern European time. Please take this time to stretch and grab a coffee and be ready for the final session of today's training.
Welcome back, everyone, to those of us who have survived. Last but not least, as our final speakers for today's seminar, I'm pleased to introduce Stefan Piccinino and Susanna Busuttil-Naudi, representing the Malta Financial Services Authority. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to you all. My name is Stephen Piccinino. I am the Deputy Head of the Due Diligence Department function within the Malta Financial Services Authority. With me here today is also Susanna Busuttil-Naudi, who is a Senior Manager in the same department. The MFSA, the Malta Financial Services Authority, is a partner to the KLEPTOTRACE project. And it is my pleasure today to be discussing with you how the Malta Financial Services Authority exercises its own controls towards combating corruption within, obviously, the sphere of influence that is impacted by the Maltese context as well as the authorities. In a moment, I will be also explaining a little bit about the MFSA, what it does, how we as the due diligence function, as partners of this project, how we fit into this whole system, and how we conduct our checks. We'll be delving quite a little bit in terms of what checks we conduct. Further into the process as well, we will have the opportunity to dig into a couple of case studies where we will be hopefully outlining to you some interesting and practical examples on how the controls that we have embedded have enabled us to find instances of potential early indicators of corruption. In both of these scenarios, we will be showing you as well how, following the information that we leveraged, how we arrived at a determination about the level of comfort we placed upon the applicants that were trying to obtain an approved position with the financial services in Malta. And finally, at the end, also, we will have an opportunity to ask for questions. I cannot see the chat box, but do please remind me if there are any questions on there. Right, so without further ado, right, we'll scroll, yeah, excellent. So what is the MFSA? The Malta Financial Services Authority is the regulator of all financial services in Malta. And by that, by financial services, we mean credit institutions, financial institutions such as, for example, money service business, payment service providers, insurance undertakings, captives, investment funds, private investment vehicles, and whatnot, trustees, fintech, and others which fall under the broad term of financial services. I would say that in terms of how I would split out the MFSA, if I were to describe it into like three main aspects of it, I would split it out into the authorization segment, the supervision, the ongoing supervision of license holders, as well as enforcement. Our function, the due diligence function, as a new centralized function that was set up to oversee these checks on proposed and new individuals, come into play throughout all stages of the MFSA supervisory life cycle. And for this reason, as the authority that is responsible to approve individuals who have to apply to obtain a position, a regulated position within the market, our function therefore plays a key role to ascertain that within this context, the individuals concerned are of good repute. Therefore, the MFSA embeds what we call a fitness and properness regime. Now, the fitness and properness regime in Malta looks very much like all its European counterparts, and it is based upon a number of tests an individual has to go through to be able to obtain regulatory approval. Our function, the due diligence function, takes care of the integrity aspect within fitness and properness, and the check that I'm going to describe in the next slide basically focus upon what a sort of aspect we look into to make sure that as the gatekeeper for the protection of the financial services market and the protection of consumers and investors, that we make sure that these individuals are indeed of good integrity. Finally, I should say, also to mention that it is not just about market penetration, it is also around ongoing supervision. And within this point, due diligence also conducts further checks throughout past the point of authorizations and the supervision by using a systematic method of screening individuals throughout the supervisory life cycle. And in this way, we can also then conduct internal ongoing reviews to make sure that we continue to safeguard ongoing as well with integrity, not just at an onboarding stage. Now, right, so how do we do this in practice? All of that I have just described, how do we actually exemplify it in reality? The first thing I would mention is identification and verification of the individual who is proposed to enter the market. We follow the same practice that the industry does in this respect, in the same way that the industry would onboard a new client whenever they need to open, for instance, an account with them. In that same manner, the MFSA undertakes to review documentation that is obtained directly from the individual to verify their identity. For instance, this may take a form of passport, identity cards, utility bills. We also obtain contact certificates, and we supplement these checks with our own documentary checks. So, for instance, we can check against primary and secondary sources. For instance, we can look at government records, court records, electoral register, and so forth, to make our own assessment. Once we have been satisfied that we have verified the individual adequately, we then also undertake screening using a variety of tools. Now, some of these also are similar to industry standards. We do in fact use industry-leading tools to conduct searches for open sources, and they would lead us to indicators, for example, of adverse media, of political exposure, as well as information about, for instance, whether an individual is subject to restrictive measures. Now, then we also supplement with our own checks against internal databases. We do have internal tools as well. We rely also on our own watch lists, court records, and so forth to further make an assessment. And on top of that, we also check against information provided by the other regulatory authorities. In doing so, with other regulatory authorities, we have memoranda of understanding at a national and international level. Nationally, obviously, for example, we liaise often with the FIU. Internationally, we have IOS for MOUs, for example, with other European counterparts, but also beyond the shores of Europe. So in that regard, there is a lot of dissemination and exchange of information. What I did forget to mention, actually, which I just remembered just now, is that we also ask the individual to provide their own submissions. Apart from documented evidence, which I highlighted at the point of verification, the individual is also asked to fill out a number of integrity-related questions. So we would then leverage these answers to these questions, and together with the information that we have at our disposal, we make a joint assessment to arrive at a conclusion. The last thing I wanted to mention as well is the participation that we've got in a number of local and international fora as the due diligence function, but also broadly within the MFSA. We are partners, apart obviously to the KLEPTOTRACE project, which is testament to one of the, I would say, a proper example of how we are participating in a forum. But apart from this, we also highly active in a number of communities in Malta, where we work jointly with other regulatory agencies towards the sharing of case studies, the dissemination also and collation of certain intelligence. We meet often to discuss, for example, practical solutions towards finding out better ways of conducting searches, of carrying out screening and identifying new tools that we could use. And we also have exchanges where we speak regularly, jointly, and exchange case studies. Internationally, we do the same. We have a number of international partners as well, and we are very active as well there, where we continue also to exchange certain case studies. I think it's excellent.
So thank you, Stephen. So following this explanation on an introduction on the Malta Financial Services Authority due diligence and the type of checks we do, here we have a number of risk typologies that we look out for to detect potential high-level corruption. Now, on the slide, there are quite a few risk indicators. Obviously, they're not exhaustive, but we'll just go through a couple of examples pertaining to each category. So the first, as Stephen was mentioning briefly before, pertains to adverse media, that is identified on the approved individual or entity seeking to be approved, whether this is identified through open sources or through other means. In such cases, we would assess the materiality of the adverse media, whether the source is credible or otherwise. For example, if we have come across a blog or, on the contrary, a reputable source, and we try to perform an overall analysis to determine whether the individual has been directly impacted or not. Where possible, we would also reach out to the source providing us with this information that we've identified, for example, by liaising with other regulators, as Stephen was previously explaining as well. Where grey areas exist, we have also an internal channel where we can liaise directly with the authorization schemes to seek feedback on certain information that is available in the public domain, and to see if we can obtain information and feedback from the individual who is seeking approval with the ultimate objective of taking the response into consideration when drafting our overall integrity outcome. Another element which we consider is political exposure, of course, which, as you may know, bears its own heightened risks of corruption and bribery. Here we would consider multiple factors such as the position the person is applying for and how influential this aspect may be, the jurisdictions associated with the individual within which they are considered to be politically exposed, as well as the potential reputation it may pose on the authority. We also consider the individual's previous involvements to understand whether the role the individual has held in previous entities was directly linked with the information that we are assessing. So an example of such would be if the entity in question was subject to any regulatory breaches or regulatory actions, administrative penalties, and whether these were due to deficiencies falling within the individual's remit or otherwise. Another key risk indicator that we consider is the jurisdictional risk, where we consider the MFSA's risk appetite towards particularly high-risk jurisdictions. We would also consider whether the entity structure at hand is, for instance, unnecessarily complex through the use of multiple layers and the involvement of multiple jurisdictions, and whether these involve offshore areas. We also take the entity types within the structure into consideration, for example, whether trusts, foundations, special purpose vehicles, or charitable institutions sit within the structure and specifically where these would be domiciled. In summary, we basically try to consider and determine all these jurisdictional factors to understand whether it is difficult to ascertain ownership and control, as well as the reasons behind this composition. For other individual profiles that pose a higher risk other than those of the average, the due diligence function also assesses source of wealth and source of funds to identify whether there are any deviations in the customer's profile. This is done while conducting a holistic analysis as to the modes and sectors through which this wealth has been accumulated. In certain cases, and if the information is available, we may also perform historical transaction activity analysis to ascertain whether we are comfortable with the individual, their profile and background, the way they have accumulated their wealth, and the origin of such funds. Finally, industry consideration is another key area we would be analyzing, and this is always done in consideration with national risk assessment, which allows us to understand any vulnerabilities and potential exposure to anti-money laundering, terrorist financing, or sanctions exposure associated with various sectors. Internally, we consider these criteria as well as others, and we have an internal mechanism which helps us take into consideration different types of risks, which help us arrive at an overall risk rating on the individual, which allow us to determine the way forward in terms of controls as well as frequency of due diligence to be applied vis-a-vis the individual or entity at hand. So moving on to the next slide. So previously we're discussing the potential risks that we may encounter and those which us as due diligence we give importance to. And now we will walk through a couple of real case studies where we can see these applied in practice. So our first case study is regarding a Saudi individual who was seeking to obtain a shareholding position in a licensed entity. Our main findings were that our screening conducted revealed that the individual is politically exposed with links to top-level officials in various Middle Eastern countries. It was also identified that one of the individual's close associates was killed in a terrorist attack in a neighboring country. An entity which was directly connected to our individual also appeared to have had financial problems, and following a look through our court records, it was revealed that the assets of the entity were frozen. Further analysis into the case revealed that several concerns existed in relation to potential embezzlement and fraud within the entity. Within this case, the MFSA reached out to other regulatory authorities who also revealed that the individual in question was refused authorization within different jurisdictions. Our due diligence findings helped us arrive to the following considerations: that basically, on the basis of the high-risk jurisdictions of hand, coupled with the high level of political exposure, and despite the fact that the individual claimed that they had resigned from the position linking them to the entity in question, the MFSA was not comfortable with the risk exposure involved due to the potential reputational risk and the overall implication on consumers and investors alike. So moving on to the second case study, here we have an Italian individual who had applied for a shareholding role in an investment firm with experience in investments for real estate and property. The high-risk factors we had identified through our due diligence checks were that the individual was fined within his role as CEO of another entity due to having a conflict of interest that another regulator had identified. This individual was further fined by yet another regulator for a fraudulent property sale that impacted the fund's performance. It was also identified that another fine was imposed for failure to oversee internal controls of the entity for which he was responsible. In parallel to all this, internally, we had also received intelligence from a foreign regulator saying that an investigation existed in relation to this individual with a focus on potential corruption, whereby he allegedly received a loan from a public official in exchange for hiring a specific individual. The individual was also named in a previous investigation for market manipulation vis-à-vis a takeover of a high-profile bank in Italy. So what does all this tell us? Here, our main considerations were this individual's connections with high-level politicians in Italy, where allegedly favors were exchanged for personal gain. A history of regulatory failures which were material in nature and where he was directly implicated, adverse media existing both in the public domain, coupled with intelligence received, as well as ongoing investigations. As we were explaining before, through our interactions with this individual, where we sought to clarify certain concerns from the public domain, despite the person appeared to be forthcoming and responding to a number of allegations found against them, the MFSA was still not sufficiently comfortable with the residual risk exposure associated with approving this individual. So here we can see that similar scenarios posing a variety of risks within these two case studies show us how we attempt to preempt key risks through tools and control that we have available, such as by leveraging screening, intelligence, engaging with other authorities, and using various resources available to us to act as gatekeeper and prevent potential activity that could harm investors and consumers in the long run from entering the financial services sector. I think that brings us to the end of this training session, where we briefly explained the MFSA's role and covered high-level concepts behind how we try to predetermine and mitigate potential high-level corruption risks from infiltrating the financial services sector in Malta. Thank you for your time. I'm not sure if there are any questions that we can take for the remaining.
I don't know if there are any questions at all. Maybe we can take a look at the chat box. I can't see the chat box.
Thank you for your engaging and interesting presentation. I think it really allowed us to gain a deeper understanding of how Maltese banking supervisor operates. We have one question that isn't in the chat box. The question is, what is your main challenge for identifying corruption risks? If you have any challenge.
Thank you for your question, first of all. I think the biggest challenge, I think I would say, is trying to know what you don't know. In the sense that we are always trying to find new ways of identifying certain information and trends in advance. We do try to proactively undertake as much as possible certain risk assessments, and we try to procure the best possible tools that we've got in the market. And we're constantly hunting for new tools and trying to see what's out there in the market that can help us try to understand. The problem that always remains at the end of the day is to try to get sufficient information in the necessary time frames to be able to act quickly, but at the same time, on a risk-based approach. We have to bear in mind that at the end of the day, for every authority, resources are limited. And in the same way that the industry exercises a risk-based approach to try to identify adverse media that could potentially impact its reputation and standing, in the same way, the authorities also have to conduct their own risk assessments. And as I'm pretty sure our colleagues in Latvia do. Yeah, it's the same situation. We try to focus on where we have inherent by looking at a combination of tools outlining industrial geographies, potential, for example, political exposure, previous indicators. For example, there might be a situation where we already know that an individual has had a problematic regulatory background. So obviously, we will exercise more focus on these higher risk scenarios. And in so doing, we try to, as much as possible, zoom in on the ones which are truly problematic. We try as much as possible, but ultimately, what's like I said, to bring us back to the original point, trying to find what you can see in front of you is probably the biggest challenge, I would say.
Thank you very much again. And with this final presentation, we come to the end of our event. I would like to thank all of our participants for sharing their knowledge and experience, as well as, of course, to all of our listeners. And as we conclude this fourth session of the KLEPTOTRACE training, we hope that you now feel more equipped to identify signs of corruption and that you have gained practical tools to be able to detect corruption-related risk factors. And I think one of the key takeaways from this session has been the importance of interagency cooperation. Sharing knowledge with one another is key to combating corruption. So thank you all for being part of this.
Once again, thank you, Paul, for your participation, and we hope to see you again soon in the next KLEPTOTRACE training seminar. We hope this session has been valuable, and we look forward to your continued collaboration in the fight against corruption. Have a great rest of the day.